Can you guys hear me? Is that loud enough? I just got it work to me here. Some kind of hands. All right. Hi. I guess we should start because it's a little bit after 1:30. I'm Alison Young, and I am the Blissful Hiker. And I should start this by saying kia ora. We can all say that together. Kia ora, which means hello in Maori. So good word to learn, good phrase to learn if you go to New Zealand. So I'm known as the Blissful Hiker, and for my first long distance through hike, something over 1,000 miles, I'll run it once, over many months, I chose a trail on the other side of the world called in New Zealand, and it's called the Araroa, and so it's T, not T. Okay, hang on. They're only hearing it through here. How do I get this? I was going to play a little bit of sound so you can hear the name of the trail said by somebody who's not an American like me. Sure. Sorry, guys. All right, so it's the long pathway. Okay, now it's not playing any sound at all. Yeah, I'm not getting any sound at all. Did I not? Sorry, guys. Oh, shoot. That is because there's like some really great bird sounds in here. Okay. That's kind of weird. I wonder why it's not playing. No, I mean, I'd have to, yeah, it'll play. So that's the sound. But it's just coming through, only through the computer sound. Well, do you want it up to my mouth?
To your left.
I could. Would you guys mind that?
No.
Oops. No. Oh, this button.
Araroa, and so it's T, not T, not T, it's T, Araroa. What does it mean? Ara is like pathway, Roa is long, so it's the long trail, or the long journey, or the long roadway.
So a lot of people ask me how to pronounce. A lot of people ask me how to pronounce Te Araroa. Te means the, and Araroa means long pathway. And Maori roll their R's slightly, so it's Te Araroa. The length is 3,000 kilometers, almost 2,000 miles. You do both the north and the south islands from Cape Reinga to Bluff. It's not a great walk. So if you've heard of the great walks, Milford being maybe one of the most famous in New Zealand. But you do walk with some of them. The Tonkariro Crossing you follow, the Huawei Nui River, which is not really a walk, it's a canoe path, canoe paddle, root burn. Eco zones include bush, beach, alpine, and volcano. It's an idea, the development was an idea by a guy named Jeff Chappell, and he wanted to create an Appalachian-style trail in New Zealand, and took a long time to combine all of these different trails that were already existing, private land, national parks, and it opened December 3rd, 2011. There's about 1,200 thru-hikers. That was the year I did. It was 2018 and 19 over the winter here. Nobos start, or northbounders, would start in mid-January. I was a Sobo, so I started in late October, I think the 28th of October. You do not need permits, except for the Queen Charlotte track in the South Island, and they ask for a $300 New Zealand donation to kind of keep things running at the Te Araroa Association. It takes about a 6-month visa to do it. You do need to stay longer than what they usually give you, a 3-month visa or something like that if you're going on your own. And the amount of time it takes to do it is 5 months, averaging just about 10 to 15 miles a day. The record is George Henderson, who did the whole thing in 50 days. So I was a solo southbounder, and I started in Northland, the tippy top of New Zealand, and I met a Kiwi friend on Facebook, which is how everything's done now. It took me 36 hours from here, leaving Minnesota, taking 3 flights and this huge long drive to get to the top at the meeting place of the Pacific Ocean and the Tasman Sea at Cape Reinga. It's one of the most spiritual places for the Maori, and it's said that their dead jump from this and will return, and 800 years their ancestors will return. This was my first night of camping. I mean, look how smooth that was. Not all camping is like that. Very loud ocean, and I fell in love with the clouds, which you will in New Zealand too, I hope, if they're not always raining. Aotearoa is the name of New Zealand in Maori, and it means land of a long white cloud. You hike in Northland to this incredible staircase that takes you what's called the 90-mile beach. It's not quite 90 miles, about 90 kilometers, but it goes on for absolutely ever, and you have squalls coming at you. I found it electrifying and wonderful. But some people found it extremely difficult. You're thinking, it's just flat. What's the big deal? I'm just walking on flat. Well, as you can imagine, for any hikers, it's really, really hard. Concrete-like sand. You have to time the tides. There's no ozone layer in New Zealand, so you can get really burned. And a lot of people get blisters and just end up getting a lot of injuries from that in the beginning. And things are really, really far. So you see that rock in the distance? It was 15 miles to walk there. The other side is where I camped that night. So it's really pretty tough. But you have interesting things you see along the way on the 90-mile beach, including tourists who come up in these big buses. And this one person asked me, she's stopping me with a backpack, and she's like, do you need anything? And I said, well, I don't know. And she said, do you want some chocolate? And I'm like, no, I want a ride. Because this is the kind of day I had. Whoops, let me get to it. Oh, is it going to start? Let's see, hang on. This is a video. There it goes. I call this Conjunctivitis Coast. It's kind of beautiful and wonderful, but the wind was so intense that within 2 weeks I had pink eye. But New Zealand healthcare is way better than ours. You just go into a pharmacist and they treat you right away. You go right from the beach into forest, into what they call bush. And they have a really kind of funny sense of humor. They say this track is extremely slippery, wet, and muddy. They're not kidding. It's extremely muddy. This is my first walk in New Zealand mud. I'm with my Kiwi friend.
Serious business.
And we had nowhere to camp. We were going through the entire thing, so we had to camp without water, what they call a dry camp, and she just tried to get in without getting too much mud inside her tent. But it was one of the most beautiful forests in the world. I just love the Northland forest. This is a kauri. It's like a sequoia, not as tall, but the fattest tree from the Jurassic period. They're protecting them, and here are some sounds. That's a tui. You never forget the first time you hear a tui. That's rain. That's a bellbird. Sounds like R2-D2. A Rio Rio. Constantly hear that. It's a moorpork. It's an owl. And you get all kinds of interesting trees here. The tomtit, you have rimu, the nuka, nikau palm, lancewood, tree fern. That's kind of a theme of New Zealand. But New Zealand has some very serious problems with predators. They only have 2 different kinds of bats that are very, very closely related as the mammals in New Zealand. So they have all these invasive species that were actually like released by people. Stoats, weasels, rats, and bush possums. No bush possum, a live bush possum's a good one, because they eat everything in the bush, including the birds. So on this far, I got that far on New Zealand, and I crossed to the which is all about time and tide and trail angels. Here I'm crossing this extremely complicated set of waterways in Pahia on the Bay of Islands. You kayak for some of the Te Araroa. You don't have to. You can walk the entire Te Araroa, but that would be on highway. So there's no point in it. This was really crazy. They have a very lax sense of safety. I mean, they just didn't put a top over it, even though waves were coming over. I don't know how many of you kayak, but I had no spray skirt. And they said, well, because we have to go through some sort of safety check. And I was like, but I know how to kayak. And they're like, no, you'll be fine, you'll be fine. And they just push you out there. I was, in the end, I was fine. This is Wakatibu stream. This is the trail. This just absolutely magical Russell forest. This is timing a tide and walking across the Tonkariro River. That's a trail angel named Roz, who is Kiwi and walked the Te Araroa when she was 67 years old. I'm super looking up to her for sure. And she came with me and crossed in bare feet, wearing my backpack, so I didn't have to wear anything. And all of those holes are made by stingrays. It was really wonderful. This is kind of a little strange, crossing the Araroa River. You just go in and try to time it so it's not over your head. And then you just start to get to these really beautiful areas. This is Green Head, and you kind of climb over all of those ridges. I went really, really high to one point and then went all the way down 800 steps to camp in a secret cove. It was really special. This is Whananaki, the longest, and that's I don't know if you can hear that, was an oyster catcher. It's the longest bridge in the southern hemisphere. That's a picture of me on top of Green Head. You can tell it's pretty hot, and my hair was getting really wild curly. But it was all of these amazing, just the beach walks, and that you're like walking on the clouds, having some really interesting days camping on what we would say, could I please camp on your lawn? Some people were here fishing, and they said, sure, I'm out there in the Hairstail dune grass. It was unbelievable. Shockingly beautiful views of the waters, this turquoise color, even though it's actually fairly cold water, just has really beautiful colors in the Pacific Ocean. Asymmetrical bivalves here, the New Zealand scallop. And again, it's all about time and tide before you get to Auckland. I hiked with a couple of friends because we had a fairly large river that comes in that we had to time so that it wasn't over our heads. So if we got it right at low tide, it would only be up to like our chests. We could still walk through. But it was really beautiful. I'm glad we did it because other people would skip it. And then I made it to Auckland, which is the largest city in New Zealand. I got there in time for Thanksgiving, and my mother-in-law's neighbor's friend married a Kiwi and just happened to live in Auckland, so they invited me for a Thanksgiving that they celebrated. So it was really, really quite fun. It was a lot of just beautiful walking through the town. This is in the domain at the War Memorial Museum, this giant fossil. It's real. I mean, can you imagine? And then you are all of a sudden like you're in this big giant city, but you're walking in these weird kind of countryside. This is the Puhenui Reserve. And the cows are just kind of coming in, checking me out. And not long then I'm really down in farmland. So you're going from Northland through Auckland, very, very narrow part of New Zealand, and you're in the Waikato King Country, which was farmland, a lot of farmland, huge dramatic clouds and storms, lots of electric fences. The TA Association does have an arrangement with people who have private land, but they don't want their creatures to get out, so they make these electric fences, and they seem to not do them quite at the right height, which is like a little too high or a little too low. So if they're too low, like you can't get under them. If they're too high, it's, for your private pits, it's a little hard to get over them. So sometimes I got little shocks. This is what the center of this is what the North Island looks like. Those are my breadcrumbs because I use a GPS, a Garmin Inreach, and walking down through all of these gorgeous places. I mean, you see remnants of bush. It's hilly. It's very, very wet. Very dramatic. The orange triangle there is telling you which way to go. There's not really a trail through here, but you sort of follow the orange triangles. This is in the timber trail through the Podiata forest, which I'm actually walking. It's kind of like rails to trails. there's bike riders in there too. It's just gorgeous, an area that was logged, that was saved. And then I just thought we'd have a little fun hearing some of the weird sounds and sights of the Wakatibu.
Exactly 10 minutes. When it stopped, it was like you had to get out. And then there was just like weird places. People would invite you to camp in a container with a couple other hikers. People I met in a bar where they let you camp in the backyard. This is in Fata. They were really fun. This is in Waitomo. Kids who couldn't go into the caves because it had been raining so hard, and they're cavers and they're practicing. We look at her. Unbelievable dexterity. Animals that just followed me along the way. And then camping on someone's lawn again. They gave me a chair, which was very nice. This is shearing. This is hysterical. Okay, so I got really close to this. It's near the little town of, Tamaraco River. They always play as loud as they possibly can 1980s American rock. I mean, it just sounds like, oh, I'm getting back to classic rock station as they're shearing the animals. Also, in New Zealand, there's no such thing as hunting season because it's just overrun with deer are predators, but they really don't belong there, so they can hunt at any time. And we met these people on the trail. That's a friend of mine who was his good luck charm. This was breakfast one day that was given to me by a camper I came across. So it all just seems like really fun and everything, but then all of a sudden you go into Mount Promia near Hamilton, and you go right back into this unbelievable mud and difficult terrain. I mean, look at that. That is the Huawei Nui track near Tonkariro, and that is the trail. I mean, it's obviously been carved out, but carved out by what? And this is when I learned a term in the Araroa trail notes. When they say tramping track standard, and they want to tell you what it is, and they say, oh, the track standard is tramping track, and you're like, okay. And then they say advanced tramping track, and we're talking like this. So, so I'm going kind of uphill and downhill over all of these routes. I mean, this was like kind of all the time. It's wet, it's hard to find your way, and the routes are very, very slippery, and it's not just like, a track like you have, like the PCT, which is just a ramp, and I can say that because I walked it. But, you're like, okay, I'm never, ever going to touch at any time, I'm not going to put my foot onto this big step, onto anything slippery, and of course, you still end up, like, wiping out. I think this is fun. Yeah, there you go. Once you're down. So it's crazy. But I got out of there. Oh, no, I should mention one thing about walking in New Zealand, and pretty much anywhere where it rains, I use real rain gear. I'm not doing any of these, like, lightweight precip jackets. I'm sure they sell them here at Midwest Mountaineering, but I wear heavier jackets, and actually, if you want to know my gear list, but I use Columbia Outdry because it really, really works. What about footwear?
I'll get to that yet. We'll do gear. I have them on right now. I use La Sportiva Akiras. This is my 9th pair of them. So anyway, I got to the Wanganui, and look at that, it's smoking. This is when you do the Tonkariro National Park. It's like the most famous sign on any road in New Zealand. There's my first alpine crossing, that's Ruapehu, which is a blown out volcano. This is Mount Doom. Let me see if I can do my Maori pronunciation. Mount Ruahoe is the name of that. It's very, very sacred to the Maori. And then the Emerald Lakes. I had reasonably decent weather going over the Tonkariro. It's very, very dangerous. It's the first time I've gotten to a really dangerous crossing because anytime that you're on an island that's that narrow, with 2 oceans on either side, I mean, you have really intense weather coming up. And so it's fast moving, it's intense, and you're totally exposed. So you may not be very high, or like at 4,000 feet or something, but you can be exposed. But I just have kind of dramatic weather. walked with a friend who's actually walking around the world right now, Tom Berman. He's a Dutch hiker he's walking the entire earth. And here he is, just giving me the thumbs up at the long drops. Right after Tonkariro, you go canoeing. You become a thru canoer on the Wanganui River. And it's really kind of interesting because Wanganui is considered a great walk, but it's absolutely gorgeous. Takes about 4.5 days. You have a fairly stiff current, but you are paddling the entire time. So it's pretty good work. And you're surrounded by these waterfalls coming from everywhere, and pretty much untouched bush. Odd little things like this bridge that was built to nowhere. They built it because they thought that all of these farmers would come and want to, farm here. That's kind of this whole colonial story about New Zealand. They got all these Scottish people to come and English people to come primarily, saying that here you can have this plot of land, but as you can see, it's quite hilly and muddy and all of that. And so this has become, it doesn't go anywhere, it's just sitting there. And it's become kind of a joke and a tourist destination. And I do have an obsession with toilets. This is at Pongo Park where I camped with my friend. And the toilets in New Zealand are called long drops, which I think is a wonderfully descriptive term. I mean, that's what's happening. But I should tell you that it's not just, like, oh, a 4.5 day of putting beer and drinking and having a good time. No. This is a river with rapids. You have 5 different major rapids, and fortunately, I hooked up with this guy, because it's better if they can give you a kayak, but you rent, and they just said, you want to go with Andrew, and what's really funny is Andrew's birthday was 2 days after mine. Both of our birthdays were in December, and I'm 30 years to the day older than him. But he was in charge, because he was in the back. And when you get to these rapids, I don't have any pictures of them because I didn't wear a GoPro, but it's like paddle, 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 paddle. You just have to paddle right into them. And you go diving down, and the water just comes splashing over you and fills. As long as you stay upright, you'll get through them. And as long as he keeps me going straight in, but I'm the one who has to keep paddling because I was in front. He emptied 26 gallons of water out of our canoe, but we never tipped. It's pretty good. And then we went to Tianjan Kayanga, which is also on the Wanganui River. It's a very spiritual place to the Maori, and they gave us a potpourri, which is a welcome. It's for me and my husband. Potpourri is a very formal welcome into the community of Maori, and it's about sacred feet. I can't get too deep into it because it's not part of my culture, but it means that when you arrive, you're a stranger, but once you've come and put your feet where these people are, your feet are sacred, and you're no longer a stranger. It's extremely moving, and that was the most deepest part of being in New Zealand for me, was the culture and the welcoming. These are 2 of my friends who are trail angels, Rob and George, and they're giving each other a hungy, which is the way that you welcome. You touch foreheads and you breathe the other person's air. Of course, it's quite difficult during COVID. And so you go from the river and you've had a good time, you haven't tipped over, you've drunk a lot of beer, and now you're in Manawatu. And it looks really lovely, doesn't it? But there is a warning. Warning, weather in the Araroa ranges is notorious for deteriorating rapidly. Be prepared for extreme conditions at all times. There can be gale force winds and heavy rain. Snow can fall in any season. Be prepared to wait out storms or for streams to subside after rain. Do not cross swollen streams. Be sure to fill in the intentions book at the start of the track. The intentions book is like something you sign into. You guys have probably seen them if you've ever done any kind of hiking. Even on the Superior Hiking Trail, they have them. You say your name and where you're going, so people can kind of have an idea, I guess, of where to collect the body. So this gives you an idea how serious they are. They want a minimum of 4. I had a maximum of 1. And it's wild. Now we're getting seriously dangerous crossings, even more so than the Tonkariro. And it's advanced tramping track. I think the picture tells you pretty well. You can see the 2 orange, I mean, I have a laser pointer, but I guess you can see them, 2 orange triangles, and you're just kind of going straight up from the river to the top. And the reason it's so dangerous in the Tonkariro is of course, the weather changes, but you are absolutely 100% exposed. The trail is on the top of these ridges. And surprisingly, I even had a lot of mud up there, and the grass covers it, so you have to really look carefully. But I had decent weather. I mean, you can see it's cloudy, but it wasn't super windy. It's the wind that's super dangerous, and people said that they would have to crawl to get past these ridges. Gorgeous, unbelievable alpine plants like edelweiss. It's a special kind of edelweiss for the southern hemisphere. And then the cloud forest belt, these goblin forests. It's an understory of Horopito and Toro, and super eerie. So you're going on those ridges and then you come down to get to the next ridge and you go through these, and you can see they have a lot of rain. That's why there's so much moss. But they're gnarled and from the rain and then just covered with hanging moss. But this video is from where I ate dinner that night. And it's absolutely silent. It's shocking. And I did meet a Kiwi later. I was all by myself, I met a Kiwi, and he said, we get like 11 days a year that are like this, where it's calm. So I had this beautiful spot, but I couldn't camp there because it's a helicopter pad, and there's no water, but you get water at the hut. So I went to the hut, which was a 2-person hut, and there were 2 people in it.
Oh.
So I camped outside, and I heard them say, it's 2 young guys from Germany, they're like, we should really give her the place, she's old. It's like, okay, I'm okay, guys, I'm okay. But you can really see how my tent is it's really wet. And then I came down. I guess I'm passing through this pretty quickly. I had really clear weather. And this is the first suspension bridge I crossed. It's only for one at a time. Gives you an idea of going across the Otaki River. I did take a short break. I didn't want to make this lecture too long because I'm going through an entire country. So I left some pictures out, but you guys can ask questions. I spent New Year's at Tonkariro, Taranaki. So you can see in this picture, I guess, how do you use this laser button? I don't know where it is. You can see in this picture, see the 2 mountains in the distance? That's Ruapehu and Tonkariro. So I came here with a Kiwi friend I met, and we went at midnight and climbed to watch the sunrise in the year 2019. And it was pretty unbelievable. It's straight up. It's a volcano, but it's scree, so it's fairly safe. And then I was in Wellington. I'm already at the end of the North Island. This glorious escarpment track. You're walking along the top, where they used to have to hike, with everything, before they built a road below that, they had to reclaim some of the land. Really beautiful Kapiti Coast here. And all of a sudden, I had a really great couple of days in Wellington, and I had spectacular weather. If I wanted to live anywhere in the world, it'd be Wellington. And then everybody tells me, it's usually windy and cold and kind of horrible here all the time. You got good weather, but look how clear it is. This is me after 1,620 kilometers, only 1,430 to go. This is at Shoreland Park at Island Bay, and it's the end of the North Island. And the next day, I went from Wellington. So this is kind of interesting. Wellington's actually south, a little bit of the South Island. I took a ferry across to Picton, and then another mail boat, which was kind of strange. The guy talked like the whole time on a microphone like me as he was delivering mail and taking us, because it was cheap, to take us all the way into the start of the Queen Charlotte track. So it was a little bizarre, but there were a bunch of us at this point that were kind of collecting and starting the Queen Charlotte track. But this is what our day was like. It was rough. We didn't have rough seas, but gray skies, and you thought, oh, I'm starting the South Island, which really is where you have the biggest mountains and kind of the most glorious views, and it wasn't very auspicious. But I woke up the next day to that. Isn't that glorious? That is an unretouched photograph This is the, when they talk about the fjords up in the north part of the South Island, the Nelson Marlborough area. Really, really easy walking here. A lot of people do this as just day hikes. They can stay inside resorts, or like pay some people to kind of camp on their lawn. It was really luxury. Also, they have amazing mussels. I picked some off the side of rocks and ate them. This is actually in a restaurant where I had green lit mussels. But this is the view from my tent on the Queen Charlotte track. It was unbelievable. And after you leave Queen Charlotte, you start to go into what everyone calls the ranges. That's just, I think that's just the way they describe it, because it's one major mountain range after another. But before you get there, you go in the Polaris River. Again, this is unretouched photograph of these streams, the Polaris River and its tributaries. And it's like jade. I mean, when you're in it, you don't really see it. It's like when you're above it, it's just absolutely gorgeous. I think I swam like 3 times that day. The water was pretty chilly, but the air was getting warm and the air was getting nice. But there was one thing that I had to do when I got to the South Island to go swimming. Does anybody know what it is? I had to get out of my clothes really fast and jump in super fast and get out fast because of these.
Oh. Okay, the sound you're hearing is actually locusts.
Those are sandflies. Nobody talks about this in the Pure New Zealand ad campaign. There's actually 19 different kinds of sandfly species. I wrote this down because it's unbelievable. There's 19 sandfly species in New Zealand, only 3 bite humans, and they're called the black fly. And they're prolific in areas near water, humid bush, beaches, lakes, rivers, swamps, and pretty much everywhere that I was walking. It was like Hitchcock. So I think that if you do any kind of tramping in New Zealand, if you're expecting to stay inside all the time, it'll be fun. But if you're going to be outside camping or swimming, you want to have socks, camp shoes, pants, something that covers you completely. I don't use DEET when I walk. I sometimes soak in permethrin, my clothes. DEET is just because then it gets on your gear and it's stinky, so it's better to just cover up. The one really great thing about sandflies, though, is they do not bite when you're moving, which is kind of incredible because mosquitoes follow me everywhere. First range, the Richmond Range. Look at that weather. I started to develop a little bit of PTSD by the time I got here for all that mud and the rain and the relentlessly bad trail. And I had great trail in Richmond Range, and weather really mattered, and I was just cruising. I was so happy until I got here. The orange pole and the triangle are always showing you the way. And I thought, wait, I'm supposed to go over there? I actually thought I was supposed to go another way. I thought I'd reached the summit and I had to go down and go to another higher summit. And you can see it's just, there are paths, but it's not like you're getting lost. It's just they're scree covered and it was really hard walking. But really beautiful in the South Island are these glorious beech trees. They absolutely felt like something mystical. Beech trees are ancient. There's fossils of them actually in Antarctica, and they're covered with this lovely moss and lichen. And there's also something that there's a kind of symbiotic relationship with insects, and so they secrete this kind of black, sometimes they're completely black, this black sticky sap, and then there's some sort of chemical change that happens with the insects. So it was really quite interesting. Huge trees with little tiny leaves, and then they were just like strewn everywhere. So you sometimes had really soft trail to walk on. It was a really magical place. These are purple pouch fungus, and saw them a lot everywhere, really bright. And then in the South Island, you came onto huts. So I started, this was great because you didn't have to stay in your tent, and a couple of really, really important things. I mean, the huts had water tanks. So you're in a lot of places, yes, you cross streams and things, but those aren't great places to camp. Up here, up high is where you can camp. So they were originally built for mustering and hunting as a first come, first served basis. So sometimes they have 2, or sometimes they have 6 bunks, or more than that. Some are very tiny and give this really helpful sign to tell you which way to get out. The one door that's available is completely dark inside. Some are really odd. This was the A-frame. Some are absolutely luxury. I mean, look how beautiful. You even have a porch to sit on. Some were very cozy. You got to know your neighbors. And all of them have long drops. That's pretty important. So they're fairly clean. I just actually got back from Scotland, and they have a kind of a hut system too. They use bothies, is what they call them. But they did not have long drops. So they had actually a shit shovel, is what they call it. Asked you to please not go near the bothy. They're also painted orange in some cases, especially in the high mountains. And that's so you can find them from the air. Because oftentimes there's a lot of heli rescues in New Zealand. And in all of them, you're forced to get along. You better get along because you're really sharing a small space. So you do, you manage to, and people laugh and have a good time. This is a little tiny hut in the Nelson Lakes National Park. So I went from Richmond into Nelson Lakes, and this is the Upper Traverse Hut, and this is the park ranger reading the weather.
Tomorrow is Sunday, rain clearing in the morning but returning in evening. Southwesterly gale, turning into severe gale in exposed places in the morning and easing later.
Pretty beautiful. We still went out in that gale, but this is what it was like. And I state the obvious. Oh, could you hear me? I said, it's windy. I could barely stand up. It was wild. We went together up over Waiau Pass, which is what that was, above Lake Constance. And kind of wild weather, but in some ways when it's dark and crazy like that, it's even more fun. We had everything, rain and the works. Weird signs here, these freaky avalanche warnings, tons of them. Eileen and Elena avalanche paths. I don't know who Eileen and Elena are. I don't know if they were taken out or if they paid for this sign, but they're warning you as you're going from a certain time, May to November, so I was safe. I was there in February. This is an area where at any moment things could fall, and it's not necessarily just snow. Sometimes it's rock. And this is what it's like when it's after a landslip. It's been there for some time. It wiped out the trail, so we had to climb up and down it, and this is right above the Harbor River. You can see how steep it is because he's using his hands. I did hear one of my friends was helied out, and I saw it in the intentions book when I got to the next hut because she slipped here and dislocated her shoulder. She was taken out to Christchurch, got fixed up, went right back on trail. So, you know, hey, we're tough. After we get out of Rome, we're going to Canterbury. Canterbury is all about river crossings, wild, wild river crossings. I did learn new skills in New Zealand. So you can see here on the map the Rakaya River and the Rangitata River. And you're kind of getting an idea where you are. You're about halfway down the South Island. There's Christchurch. The Rakaya and the Rangitata, what they do is they just call them hazard zones. This is how the Te Araroa Association just manages the trail. They can't build a trail through them. So they say when you get there, you're going to have to arrange for a ride and go around them. And the reason, in particular, the Rakaya is so dangerous, this is actually not my photograph. This is from air. The Rakaya is a braided river. Now we have braided rivers in the Yukon and in Alaska. I don't know that there are any in the lower 48 states. Maybe there are. They're huge. So the distance across this riverbed is, 6 or 7 miles. And you never know which braid is going to be the really dangerous braid to go in. So that's why it's considered a hazard zone. You can't cross it on foot. You have to find a way around. I also had these interesting places where the trail was wiped out. This is the Tamaraco River, and you can see, maybe you can see my friend walking as close as he can get to the edge, and we managed to get around it right on that little tiny thin edge. I think we walked a little bit in water, but you definitely didn't want to step into that river. It would be dangerous as all get out. This is a bush stream. Two of my friends having a little bit of fun. You can see the water's all the way up to her, above her knees. It's up into her thighs, but it was just one small strand of it, so it was easy to get through. That's in the 2 thumb track. This is the Huawei Nui River, and we crossed crab-like. So that means they're actually not doing it correctly, because you would want to unhook your backpack, put your arms underneath the other person, and you actually go sideways. They're going, well, there it goes. You go sideways to the water so that you're both of you are facing downstream. But it was pretty wild when we got across that one. Sometimes they build bridges. This is the 3-mile bridge, which freaked me out completely over Cameron Stream. I think we probably could have crossed Cameron Stream, but you can see there's so much silt in it, you can't tell how deep it is. And as you get further into it, it's very hard to turn around. That young man, again, it's another person who's probably 30 years younger than me, but he hiked with me, Tomasz. And Tom and I went to the Potts River. This area is actually used in the movie Lord of the Rings. There's a really beautiful place, Mount Someday is in this area, and we crossed the Potts River on a bridge, and then we got to the Rangitata. Now the Rangitata, you are supposed to get a ride around. So you would at the Potts River, there would be, you'd hitchhike to try to get around it. We decided to cross it because we'd seen enough people coming north who made it across. It's possible to do. And as you can see, Tom's very tall, so I trusted him. So we're heading across, and it's 9 kilometers the size of the riverbed. And some of it is filled with quicksand, so you have to be really quite careful where you place yourself. You're not going to get sucked in like a horror movie and die, but you could hurt yourself. And we walked, and it was a long way until we got to the actual channel. And I like to call it chakwa. It's like chalky and it's aqua mixed together. It's rushing, it's really cold, it's silty. And we tested and tested where to cross, and we found it. And Tom is taking a video of me going. You see, it's not really above my knees. And I'm not being all that careful, but it is going fast. Would you die in water like that? You could. So you want to be really careful. There are a couple of things that New Zealanders do different. Kiwis face down the river. Americans face up the river. I like looking at it. I like seeing what's coming at me. But they allow, and that's easy, they allow the river to pull them. And so it's kind of a different way of going. You always keep 3 things down at once. And always travel with your sticks. I don't know if you can notice there that my stick, I use lecky poles. One of them is bent. And I bent it right at the beginning of near Waiau Pass in the Nelson Lakes. So I still had about 1,000 kilometers to go after that, and I fell here on mud. The stick wouldn't have stopped me. And that's what they looked like. They just had this big bend in them. One of my friends took those, a photographer. And they held up. And so I have like a little bit of a feeling of using aluminum rather than carbon, because aluminum will bend. Now, you won't want to bend it back, because if you bend it back, then you'll make a weakness. But carbon usually just shatters. So when I fell on it, and I did this like fantastic roll, and I thought, am I alive? I'm okay. And then I saw this big bend. But you had still huge mountains to climb. This is the two-thumb track, which I would say in some ways was the hardest, up and down and up and down, and endless. And these beautiful places like Moisenberg Peak, this is looking towards Lake Tekapo is the very far in the left, and Mount Cook is somewhere in there in the clouds. But my sticks still worked, and I used them through the rest of the entire trail. They were still very, very strong. I had to set my tent with them, so they worked. Or as they would say in New Zealand, my tint. I put them away for this one section on the aqueduct. It was the Alps to Ocean bike path. I rented a bike. It's just some weird things in Canterbury. Stayed in a hobbit home in Twizel. That was really fun. It was a trail angel. And then I was in Otago. And Otago has just a really different feel to it. It's starting to get drier and kind of bigger and massive. And this is a term that a lot of people in New Zealand use. It's cruisy. I mean, look how great that trail is. It looks like Appalachian Trail is fast moving, just gorgeous mountains all around you. You're like, yeah, I'm cruising. We should never take anything for granted at any time in New Zealand, because that sent me directly down into a riverbed that I followed for, I think it was like 15 kilometers. Oh. And so like I'm like up on the sides, I'm in the water, it's gorgeous, it was beautiful, and I had a fantastic day, but it's super slow. And what we call sidling, where you're sent up on the side and you can kind of see where people went, and then you can walk on the river, instead of walking in the river because it's too deep. You have like river that looks like that, rock, and it was gorgeous, but I was about to lose my mind. And then it took me 6 hours to get through there, and then I had a sign that said which way it was to the hut, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm here, it's up, now I'm off the river, and it said 2 kilometers, 2 hours. And I thought, 2 hours? Because it was literally straight up. So I went right back up again, and this is Breast Hill, looking down to Lake Huawei, and this is camping, Lake Huawei. Sometimes it was like that. It's kind of a fun night. This is Motutapu, so you see how the land is just getting more deserty. This is Shania Twain's property, and she donated huts that she built, or had built. They're really modern, modern in the sense, there's no like running water or electricity. But beautiful huts, but very, very steep and rugged there. And I'll just go this quick. So after Motutapu, I hit another major hazard zone, which is Lake Wakatibu. And I ended up getting hitchhiked up. This is an area that's also used in the Lord of the Rings. It's near Queenstown. I ended up hitchhiking, getting 2 hitches, to the end, to Glenorchy, and then to the root burn track, which is actually not on the trail, but it's another way to go. And I camped illegally. Don't know. This is the glamorous life of a thru hiker. And see how blue the water is? Isn't that gorgeous? And it rained all night long, and that's what the water looks like in the morning.
Oh.
It was a torrent. Now I'm a bridge, and I'm on a great walk. So it was 20 miles. It was far, but it was really, really great trail. These kind of amazing views. I was feeling sorry for myself because it rained and I was cold and and then I saw this family, this French family, hiking too with their children, and I thought, why are you complaining? And they dressed their children in garbage bags. So I thought, and they looked happy. So I thought, yeah, okay, I'm gonna make it out of here. So I added the river to the trip, and then I'm in Southland. This is the final bit of the Araroa Southland, the last section. Gorgeous. I had some beautiful weather in the Bavora Lakes area. That is very, I'm walking on a road, and that is very much a very New Zealand-y look, where you have a lot of tussock and grass, and these just, huge sweeping views. But the Araroa ends in the same kind of way it started. It gets rough and difficult. And I went right back into high grass. Actually, there's a little bit of a joke about that. I showed you the picture of George and Rob doing the hongi. And they were my friends that I met in the North Island. They're trail angels. And I told them I was like losing it. I just couldn't do anymore. And they started to use this kind of code word of high grass. And then they shared it with all of their thru hikers that came and stayed with them, because they were trail angels. They had thru hikers coming up all the time. And they said, if you're ever in trouble, just say high grass, and we will come to your rescue. So I was pretty buried there in Takatimu, and then it just gets awful. I wasn't thinking it was beautiful anymore. This was hard. The mountains were gorgeous, but such hard walking, day after day, and at least it's a trail, right? Of this kind of stuff and sinking in. And at the top of this one, I think it was like the last mountain in the Longwood Forest. This is the end of the trail. It was supposed to be a clear day. And I met 2 DOC, it's like our DNR, Department of Conservation, workers at the top, and I said, they kind of rolled down their window and were like, who are you and what are you doing here? And I said, but today was supposed to be beautiful. And they just laughed at me because they knew it was not beautiful, it was horrible. But when I got out of there, I went right back down finally to the beach to round the entire trip off. And you're at Colac Bay. You have about 3 days still to go along ocean and before you get to Bluff. So you're walking on this just beautiful, very different. You're on the Tasman side You walk from Riverton to Invercargill. And they have, recently, they're always making changes, so they have created a completely separate track. I walked on the road to get to Bluff, and all of the truck drivers were like honking at me, and because they all knew where I was going, because I had this big backpack on and I'm walking on the road. And the first thing I did when I got to Bluff was have oysters, which are the greatest, and I guess the Southern Hemisphere, best I've ever had. And then I was at the end. I was born in New York, so that was kind of fun to be set up on top of that. I had to be lifted and put there. So that was my trip. And so basically what happened was I took a leave from my job and I walked there. Oh, that is the spot where, that is the mountain that was in the Lord of the Rings. So I'm just making a little fun thing. And so I'm opening up to questions if you guys have any questions. I wanted to run it through it so we can get all my pictures. And then I can put it here. If anybody wants to follow my hikes or see more pictures, you can do that too. Do you guys have any questions? Yeah?
Did you mention that you also hiked the Pacific Crest Trail?
I did. I hiked the Pacific Crest Trail the same year that I did the Araroa.
Okay.
So that was a little crazy, but I came back from my leave of absence and my job was ended. So I just went back on trail.
Oh, wow, okay.
So I did it in 2019, which was maybe the best summer ever to do it because there was no fire danger at all.
Okay, so my question is, well, largely I just want to hear about the gear that you used and then also what was the crossover going from Araroa to the Pacific Crest Trail. Did you use all the same gear? What things did you switch out? What was different with the different gear?
Yeah, oh, for sure. So it's about gear. Definitely, the Pacific Crest Trail was hotter in a lot of places, so I had like different tops, but I pretty much took everything the same.
Okay.
I've made changes to my gear list over the years, so if you go to my website, you can see there's a New Zealand page, Araroa page, and it has the gear list from that, and I'm using a different tent now. What else am I using? I kind of switch back and forth between different backpacks depending on the size I need. So I used a Granite Gear Crown 60, is that it? Crown 260, which is great. It's a fabulous backpack, and it just has just the right amount of room. But I didn't need a backpack that big, so I have a Gossamer Gear 50, which is a little smaller. I did a lot of cowboy camping, cowgirl camping on the PCT, so I didn't need a tent all the time. But yeah, I used a lot of the same gear, and I can definitely share that with you if you want to know. Yeah.
Do you have a recommendation, like, to do one versus the other, or would you say do both, or?
Everybody should do the PCT. The Pacific Crest, or parts of it, bits of it. The Pacific Crest Trail is like, one of the most beautiful trails in the world. It's here in the United States. You can do it bit by bit. The JMT, the John Muir Trail, is the section through the Sierra, and it's 230 miles. I think I have that right. So it's really doable if you're working. You can take the time to do that, and and you have a really big window. The Pacific Crest Trail, you have to move pretty fast because you have to get through the snowy areas. The TA is very special. I mean, I loved it, and putting these pictures together just made me laugh and remember so many amazing experiences. But it is a long, long slog, and it takes a long time. So you have to have that kind of time. And I didn't want to. My husband was like, "Why don't you go to like the North Island and then go back and do the South Island?" And I thought, because I'll never go back. It's just better to do it all at once, which I was glad I did.
So how did you communicate when you were out in?
Oh, I use the Garmin Inreach Mini. I actually bought it here, so you can get it.
I mean, like back to the States, or?
Yeah, communicating through that. It's a two-way.
Okay.
Yeah, and so it has. I mean, I could have put anybody on the list, but I just communicated with my husband, and I had my phone. But on that, you can set these. There's like 3 messages that you can set forever, which is I'm starting my trip. I usually say something silly, like I'm pausing for lunch and a whiskey or a nap or something, and then I'm stopping. So in the morning, when I'm starting, I would just hit start, and I can set the amount of time in between, and it tracks me. So if it could be like 10 minutes, 1 minute. I usually do 2 hours, and he gets an email that shows me where I am. And, but I also have, since it's so small, it's really hard to do messages on it. So you Bluetooth it to your phone, and you get these, like Twitter number, I think it's 140 characters. And there was one case particularly on the PCT, where I was like, you know, I need a warm sleeping bag. You need to send it right now. It was when I got to, I just crossed into Yosemite National Park, and the temperatures were dropping really fast. So he sent it to Mammoth Lakes, and I was able to like walk and get there. Because there was no way I was going to be somewhere where I could phone him or have any cell service.
So, but in New Zealand, how did you deal with resupply there?
Oh, resupply. Yeah, well that's, I sent 4, maybe just 3 packages, and that's it in New Zealand. Because I could stop in places to get food, but the ranges was the area where it was really complicated to get out. I mean, it wasn't that far, but you'd have to get a hitchhike, and sometimes it'd have to be like 2. They'd sort of take you to one corner, and then you'd have to get another one. So I sent packages, and it's expensive to do that, you know, but I sent them from Wellington. And so it's cheaper than sending them from here. On the PCT, I sent like 3 packages ahead of time, and then I would send them from trail, which I think is always a good idea if you're thinking of doing a through hike, unless it's something like the JMT, which is not that long. But if it's something where you're not going to need anything for like 2 months ahead, sometimes you just want to send it from trail. If you need new shoes, you may have to have somebody, if you have specific ones. So actually that's a good question, I forgot about this. In New Zealand, I took what's called a bounce box. So I had extra pairs of shoes, extra pairs of socks, things that I wasn't sure I could get there. You know, it would be expensive to order, and I wasn't going to get the things I wanted. And I took them with me, and then I would send them like to a friend in Auckland, send them to Wellington, send them to Nelson, you know, sent them ahead. And then I could change out the things I needed. So I like carried it on the plane. That's basically what I did.
What about footwear? You didn't really talk
Oh, my
about
footwear.
So these make it through mud and keep coming.
These are my favorite shoes of all time. So I have La Sportiva Akira, and you can see they have like these lugs on the bottom. They're almost like high heels. You want to come closer?
Yes, I want to write now.
You want to take a picture? You. These are brand new. I wore my new ones.
So that's it, no ankle support, no, not really water support?
No, and I am, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to keep this since with COVID, but I do not use waterproof shoes. And the reason for that is because you're going into water, you know, at least your knees. And in New Zealand, there's kind of a joke about it. People never take their shoes off to go in water because you never get anywhere. There's so many rivers to cross. And also it's safer to keep your shoes on, but they fill up with water, and boots will. And if you have, I mean, I had a pair of sneakers, I mean, they were low, that were, you know, had the waterproofing. And what it felt like you had sort of this sloshing around in there. And you really want your feet dry. So wearing a sock liner is a really good idea. I found that out in Scotland. You can get very, very pruny feet from all that wet. So if you have some kind of sock liner, or if you could change your socks often. But these tend to dry pretty fast, too. But they have, I mean, Sportivas makes climbing shoes, and so they have that really wonderful rubber on the bottom. So they hold really well. And they're built with this, I mean, I have a review on there. There's all these different things they do. It's that heel thing that gives you kind of it pushes you ahead a little bit. I love them, but I do get men's because they're a little kind of lighter than women's. So I love these shoes, but it's very personal. Anything else anyone wants to know? Yeah.
Did you, like for all the like rentals of the kayaks and canoes and stuff, did you have to plan that way ahead, or could you do it like once you got there?
That's a really good question. It's about renting stuff. What's really nice about the TA Association is they have trail notes. So I didn't put that on here, but it's like Araroa or taassociation.org.nz or something like that. But they have trail notes, and they give you these addresses and stuff. So when you would arrive in a town before you did the Tonkariro Crossing, and you did all your plans to get your canoe. The kayak was a little bit like, I called him a day before, and he's like, well, if you can get 3 more people, and oh, the tides are really more pictures. This is my thing, yeah. Oh.
So for like Pacific Crest Trail, there's a very specific time window because you have to get there before, cold and all
Yeah.
that. Is there a similar thing on the?
Yes,
Araroa?
definitely. If you're gonna do the entire trail and you start from the north, it needs to be mid-October to mid-November.
Okay.
And you need to be getting off the trail, I mean, it depends on how fast you walk. If you're super fast, you need to be getting to Bluff before, like, early March. Because it just starts to get too cold. And if you're up in those mountains, it can be really cold. A lot of people hike from the south and they just do the South Island. And a lot of people ask me that, which island is better to do. I loved the North Island because there were just so many more interesting people to meet, and it was just much more of a cultural experience. There's also incredibly beautiful parts of it. If you only had time to do one island, the South Island is more, it's got kind of more of the touristy, mountainous beauty that more people seek out. And you don't have as much road walking as you do on the North Island. There is road walking, but they also consider road walking even when you're walking on like a farm road that no cars ever come on. So yeah, so it's like over our winter. But you could go in January and start from the south and just do the South Island. So a lot of people do that. Yeah. Yeah. No, he doesn't like to hike as much as us. I know, we have a kind of odd relationship because when we were asking about the PCT, I lost my job and I was like, what am I going to do? And he said, go hike another trail, go right now. And I'm like, I can't do that. And he said, you're 100% boss free, go. And I was like, are you trying to get rid of me? And it's like, well, I mean, because we communicate every single day. But he came to New Zealand and we did a great walk. We did the Kepler, which was amazing, and did a lot of touristy things. But this kind of walking is, I mean, has anybody in here done a through hike? You have, which one?
I did the AT.
You did the AT. I mean, you get really kind of, grungy and, yeah, did you love it?
I did, yeah, I loved it.
Awesome, yeah.
How did you keep yourself going? Like, you're in the mud and the rain and the rivers and you're by yourself. How did you just keep going?
Cheers. Chocolate. A lot of gummy bears. Sour Patches. There was a place in Washington where I did this, where it was super, super steep. This was with a PCT, and I was like, okay, every single is switchbacks. Every switchback I get to, I get to have one more gummy bear, and it got me up to the top. I mean, that's the whole thing. You guys must have heard about the guy he's 83 years old who just finished the AT. Now he didn't do it as a through hike. He did it in sections. But my God, if we could walk like that at that age, I mean, it's unbelievable. But he said so much of it is psychological. So it's the, it's just trying to kind of talk your way into it and try to stay in the present moment. Remember what a gift this is that you have this time to do it. I mean, it is sort of a glorified vacation in a lot of ways. What you're doing, I mean, it's not really work, although I did blog every single day. I remember, I showed you that picture at the end where I'm in the high grass and all that mud, it was horrible. And I met this guy walking north when I was at Twizel at the Hobbit House. And he said to me, he goes, oh, when you get to this spot, keep a good attitude. And I was like, what are you talking about? I've already hiked, 1,200 miles. Who are you to tell me? Because he hadn't hiked very far, right? He said, trust me, keep a good attitude, just tell yourself. And he was right. I got there and it was horrible. It was this grass, it was this mud, and it just went on. And at that point, you were just sick of it. And I kept thinking to myself, it's gonna end, you're strong. But you also have to be very careful not to go too fast because you could hurt yourself. So it's a lot. It's a lot. It's psychological, I think.
The south spot versus the north spot, which way it seems easy or difficult? Is it a difference?
Oh, well, if you're doing the entire trail, I loved going from the north because you are introduced to mud and everything right away, but those mountains aren't as hard. I think the harder mountains are in the South Island, in terms of elevation and stuff. Yeah, I think so. I love South Mountains. You're maybe a little bit more introduced to it. But, I guess if there's anything that you take from today, especially the gal here who wants to do a long distance hike. New Zealand doesn't have any such thing as trail standard. You know, everything's different. Sometimes it's easy as can be, and sometimes you're just screaming. I mean, there was this moment where I was like, you know, screaming at Doc. God damn it, Doc, where? Because you're looking, you can't see, and you're in the bush, and there's no orange triangles. Although they have to have orange triangles to show you which way to go, and you can't see anything, and you're angry, and you're just throwing your sticks down. And what am I doing here? I hate New Zealand. I mean, that's, you go through this whole thing, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, it's right over there. Okay, you know, go on, and you're fine. So there's that extreme, and then these kind of dangers. It's not the same as, like, well, the AT doesn't really have, I wouldn't say necessarily has trail standard, but there's so much that people are working on all the time. You have maintenance crews and you know, teams of people trying to really keep the trail beautiful and walkable. And it's not like New Zealand. It's always
Is it well marked, the whole trail?
Yes, better marked than the CDT. That's where you can really get lost there if you don't have navigation skills. There are these orange triangles and orange holes, but they're sometimes hard to find, and they're sometimes covered by things. It's a pretty, you know, it's not a large population in the country, and the great walks are their pride and joy. These beautiful walks that are very expensive to walk on. And this is where it's really beautiful. The hiking in what they call the, I guess, backcountry, is, in some ways, they want to keep it wild. I mean, that's part of that's kind of part of the culture. You know, the people wearing, you may have seen pictures of, like, they have these high top gaiters with boots. Most people hike in boots there, not sneakers, and shorts. And that's kind of look, I mean, raincoat. You know, that's kind of a look of a New Zealand tramper, and they want it hard and want to go out into the backcountry, and there's huts everywhere. It's not just on the TA. There's huts all over the country, especially in the South Island. So that's part of the culture, and I think sometimes to your question, I would get so angry about how bad the trail was, and think, you know, why aren't they maintaining it? And, you know, they don't care about us, and you know, and it's like, this is not here for you. I mean, this is a privilege for you to be enjoying this experience. So to kind of flip the attitude was really important. Yeah.
Any critters that can really hurt you?
No, critters, no, not unlike Australia. There are no dangers, no snakes, no spiders, there's nothing poisonous. One friend had, you know, these stoats and marmots and stuff that are there, did chew through her tent. I think they made a hole, she had some food in there. Wouldn't hurt her. No, I mean, the biggest danger is that they put poison out for them, and so you should be very careful that you're not, you know, if you have an animal with you, like a dog or something, you run in the way of that. Probably the most dangerous thing are river crossings. That they, you know, on the PCT, you hear of people leaving the trail because of overuse. They've hiked so much they've given themselves shin splints. On the Araroa, people are hellied out because they've wiped out in on a landslip or in mud or in a river. And rivers are deadly. People do die on them. So I did see a couple of signs for missing people, which was kind of freaky. They're looking for them, and you know, I mean, I guess anywhere you could fall. But I was